A few years ago, I had a coworker I quietly assumed had everything figured out. New car every couple of years, a house in the nicer part of town, vacations that showed up in my feed looking effortless. I remember genuinely comparing myself to her, wondering what I was doing wrong that she clearly wasn't. I never asked her directly. I just quietly recalculated my own progress against a picture of hers I'd mostly invented. Then, through a conversation that had nothing to do with money, I found out most of it was held together by debt, minimum payments, and good timing. The house was more of a stretch than it looked, and the car wasn't really hers to begin with. She wasn't ahead of me. She was further behind than I was, and she'd simply gotten very good at making it invisible. I remember feeling a strange mix of relief and guilt when I found out. Relief that I wasn't actually falling behind, guilt that some part of me had needed someone else's struggle confirmed before I could let go of a comparison that was never fair to begin with. This isn't a video about anyone in particular. It's about something almost nobody says out loud, that the people who look the richest around you are often the least reliable measure of what actual wealth looks like, and the people quietly doing the best are usually the ones you'd never suspect at all. Here's the myth worth killing first. We assume visible spending is a window into someone's finances. The car tells you something true, the house tells you something true, the vacation photos tell you something true. Almost none of that is reliable information. What you're actually looking at is someone's spending decision, filtered through however they chose to finance it, which tells you close to nothing about what's sitting underneath it. Let's run a quick experiment. Picture the next nice car you see in a parking lot. Right now, roughly 1 in 4 new car loans in this country stretch to 84 months or longer. 7 years of payments for a car that'll likely be replaced or worn out well before the loan is. Nearly 1 in 5 buyers are paying $1,000 a month or more just for the vehicle itself. That car in the parking lot isn't a receipt for wealth. It's frequently a receipt for a 7-year bet that nothing changes. Do the math on that bet for a second. A car financed near $800 a month for 7 years is a commitment of well over $60,000 before interest gets counted separately for a vehicle likely traded in or simply worn out around year 5 or 6. The driveway shows you the car. It never shows you the $60,000 promise sitting quietly underneath it. I think about my old coworker's car every time I catch myself doing the comparison thing. It looked like evidence. It was actually a monthly obligation dressed up as a status symbol, and I'd been reading it completely backwards. There's decades of actual research behind why this illusion works so well on all of us. In the mid-90s, 2 researchers named Thomas Stanley and William Danko spent years studying American millionaires directly, expecting to find people who looked the part. They mostly didn't. Many of the millionaires in their research drove ordinary, several-year-old cars, lived in unremarkable houses, and worked in trades and small businesses nobody would associate with the word wealthy. Meanwhile, plenty of high earners in the very same research, doctors, executives, people with genuinely impressive incomes, had surprisingly little actual net worth because their spending had grown right alongside their paycheck. Stanley and Danko gave these 2 groups names: people whose wealth outpaces what their income alone would predict, and people whose income is high but whose accumulated wealth badly lags behind it. The uncomfortable finding underneath both categories was the same. Income and net worth are far less connected than almost anyone assumes, and visible lifestyle is one of the worst ways to guess at either one. Picture the second group for a second, because they're the ones most likely to be the person you're quietly comparing yourself to. A high-earning professional, a good title, a genuinely impressive salary on paper, but the mortgage, the leased car, and the lifestyle all match the income exactly, so every dollar has somewhere to go before a single one reaches savings. From the outside, this looks like the most convincing version of making it you'll see all week. From the inside, it's often one bad year away from real trouble, with less actually saved than someone earning half as much who never let their spending catch up to their paycheck. They even built a rough formula for it, not a universal standard, just a way to compare accumulated wealth against age and income. Take your age, multiply it by your annual income, divide by 10, and that's roughly the net worth you'd expect someone in your position to have accumulated by now. Someone who's built up twice that or more is quietly ahead of where their paycheck alone would suggest. Someone sitting at a fraction of it, no matter how impressive their job title or their driveway looks, is behind, and the driveway, as we've already established, was never going to tell you which one you were looking at. It's a rough heuristic from one piece of research, not a judgment on anyone's worth as a person, so hold it loosely rather than as a scoreboard of your own. Watch what happens when you flip the question around instead of taking it at face value. Instead of asking, how do they afford that? A more useful question is usually, what would it cost me monthly to have that, and is that a bet I'd actually choose to make on purpose? Almost nobody asks it that way. We see the object and assume the ownership. We rarely see the financing. I have an uncle who, by any visible measure, looks like he's barely getting by. Same car for 11 years. A house he bought decades ago and never upgraded. He orders the same thing every time we go out, and it's never the most expensive item on the menu. It wasn't until a conversation about a family matter, years into knowing all this about him, that I found out he'd been quietly investing a serious chunk of every paycheck since his 20s and had built a net worth that would surprise almost everyone who knows him casually. He wasn't hiding it out of secrecy or shame. It simply never occurred to him that it was information anyone needed. Nothing about how he lives would have told you that. That was rather the point. Here's where the psychology gets interesting, because this isn't just about other people's spending choices. It's about what watching them does to you. A well-known idea in social psychology holds that people don't judge their own situation in a vacuum. They judge it relative to whoever happens to be nearby. Researchers studying this effect directly, using large-scale survey data on income and self-reported well-being, have found that people living among higher-earning neighbors report measurably lower satisfaction with their own financial situation, even when their own income hasn't changed at all. The house down the street doesn't have to cost you $1 to cost you something. Just knowing it's there and comparing yourself to it does some of the damage on its own. Two people can earn the exact same salary and feel completely different about it, purely based on who happens to live around them. Someone earning $90,000 a year in a neighborhood where that's a solid, comfortable income tends to feel genuinely fine about their finances. Someone earning that same $90,000, surrounded by neighbors clearing twice, that can feel quietly behind, even though nothing about their own paycheck, their own expenses, or their own actual financial position has changed at all. The number didn't move. The comparison did all the work. This isn't a trap that only catches people at the top, either. It runs at every income level, just with the reference point shifting each time. Someone renting a modest apartment compares themselves to a coworker who just bought a starter home. That coworker compares themselves to a neighbor with a bigger house. That neighbor compares themselves to someone with a vacation property. Nobody in that entire chain feels like they've arrived, because the comparison is always pointed one rung up, never held still long enough to actually measure anything real. Ask any person in that chain how they're doing financially, and almost all of them will describe themselves as somewhere in the middle, comfortable, but not quite where they'd like to be, regardless of which rung they're actually standing on. The house itself deserves its own number here, because it's not just the car in the driveway that's often stretched thinner than it looks. Roughly 1 in 4 homeowners in this country are considered house poor, spending more than 30% of their income just to keep the home running, before groceries, before savings, before anything else. The impressive address can be every bit as financed as the car in front of it. Both are frequently a monthly bet, not a finished accomplishment, and both get read by everyone driving past as evidence of something that was never actually proven. I think about this every time someone describes a home purchase as a stretch but worth it. That phrase gets said cheerfully at a housewarming, and it means something completely different a year later, quietly, at 2 in the morning, when the property tax bill and the insurance renewal land in the same week as a slow month at work. The house doesn't change between those two moments. Only the visibility of the strain does. There's a newer version of this same illusion showing up in far smaller purchases now too. Buy now, pay later services, splitting an ordinary purchase into smaller installments at checkout. Used occasionally and paid off on schedule, that's just a payment method. But it works on the same illusion as the car and the house, just shrunk down to a pair of shoes or a coat. I caught myself doing this once, with a coat I didn't especially need, splitting it into 4 payments purely because the checkout screen offered it as the default option. Nothing about the coat looked any different to anyone who saw me wearing it. It just felt lighter to buy in the moment, in a way that had nothing to do with whether I could actually afford it outright, and everything to do with how the payment was framed to me at the exact second I was deciding. This isn't a new problem dressed up in a modern feed. Over a century ago, economist Thorstein Veblen coined the phrase conspicuous consumption for spending whose main purpose is being seen, not being used. Not long after, a newspaper comic strip gave the behavior its lasting name: a family exhausting themselves trying to match their neighbors, the Joneses, purchase for purchase. We still use that name today. It just used to run once a day in the newspaper, instead of scrolling past you every few minutes. What's changed isn't the impulse, it's the volume. A neighbor's new car used to require actually driving past their house. Now that same comparison arrives dozens of times a day, curated and edited down to the best angle, from people you've never met. Nobody posts the auto-pay reminder or the minimum payment due. The feed only ever shows the acquisition, never the arithmetic that made it possible. I know what some of you might be thinking, and it's a fair pushback. It's easy to say, ignore the comparison, and much harder to actually feel invisible around people who visibly aren't holding back. There's real social pressure in showing up to a friend's birthday looking like the only one not participating in a certain kind of lifestyle. I'm not going to pretend that pressure isn't real. I've felt it standing at a group dinner, watching everyone else order without glancing at the prices, doing quiet math about my own share of the bill while trying to look like I wasn't. Weddings are their own particular version of this: the destination bachelorette, the coordinated outfit, the gift that needs to look like it matches everyone else's, all arriving in the same season as 3 other friends' weddings. Almost nobody at that event is going to mention what any of it cost them to attend. But it's worth naming plainly what that pressure actually is: a bill for other people's approval, charged in a currency that never shows up in your own net worth. You're allowed to decide that bill isn't worth paying, even while everyone around you keeps paying it. If you've watched the videos on this channel about giving every dollar a job, or the order money should move through before it reaches investing, this is the piece those systems are quietly protecting you from. A budget built with intention doesn't ask whether the neighbor's car looks impressive. It asks whether this dollar's job was already decided in advance. The whole appeal of a system like that is that it takes the comparison out of the decision entirely, because the decision already happened, calmly, before anyone else's driveway had the chance to influence it. This matters beyond just your own decisions, too. Whatever version of this you model gets absorbed by whoever's watching you, especially a child. Not because kids audit bank statements, but because they notice which purchases seem to need a conversation and which don't, and what "we can't afford that right now" sounds like when it's said out loud. Whatever pattern you're running, someone nearby is quietly learning it as normal. If comparing yourself to whoever's nearby is what got you into this in the first place, the way out isn't finding a better person to compare yourself to. It's changing what you're comparing against entirely. Your net worth from a year ago is a real number, one you actually have access to, built from your own decisions rather than someone else's financing. Measured against that, almost everyone is either moving forward or standing still for a clear, fixable reason. And either answer tells you something true, which is more than any neighbor's driveway was ever going to offer you. In practice, that's as simple as writing down what you have today, adding up what's in savings and retirement accounts, and subtracting what you owe, and doing the same thing again in 12 months. The number itself matters less than the direction. Someone who moved from slightly negative to modestly positive over a year did something that no amount of comparison to a neighbor's new car would ever reveal about their own progress. That comparison, unlike the one with the driveway, is actually measuring something real. Here's the part almost nobody says out loud, and it's the actual reason any of this matters. For most ordinary incomes, building wealth and consistently looking wealthy often compete for the same dollars. Building real net worth means consistently spending less than you make and letting the difference compound quietly, invisibly, for years, with almost nothing to show for it in the short term. Looking wealthy means spending visibly, immediately, in ways other people can actually witness. At very high incomes, someone can occasionally do both, but for most people, choosing one means there's simply less left over for the other, which means the version of rich you're most likely to see with your own eyes is, more often than not, selecting for exactly the wrong trait. Think about what that actually means for the comparison you're running in your head right now about whoever it is you measure yourself against. You may be comparing yourself to someone financing the appearance of getting ahead rather than someone who's actually doing it, and from the outside, there's almost no reliable way to tell the difference. There's something almost freeing in sitting with that for a second. If the comparison was never a fair measurement to begin with, if the very act of being visible tends to select for finance spending rather than accumulated wealth, then losing that comparison was never actually evidence of falling behind. You weren't losing a real race. You were losing a race against a number that was mostly made up. I think about my old coworker sometimes, and I don't say any of this with judgment toward her. I understand the pull completely because I've felt it myself. What strikes me now isn't that she was struggling, it's that I had absolutely no way of knowing that from the outside, and neither does anyone looking at any of us. The quiet version of doing well doesn't announce itself. It never has, and it was never supposed to. We're not close anymore, but I heard, a while back, that things had gotten simpler for her. Smaller, calmer, less to manage. I don't know how it's going for her now. What I do know is that the version of her I used to compare myself to was never actually real in the first place, and comparing myself to it cost me something regardless. The people actually building wealth around you were never going to be the ones you noticed. They were the ones who figured out, a long time ago, that they didn't need you to. If you've made it this far, you clearly care about understanding money in a way that actually works in real life, not just on a whiteboard. That's exactly what this channel is all about. Every week, I break down personal finance, investing, budgeting, and wealth building into simple, practical lessons anyone can use. If that sounds like something you'd find valuable, consider subscribing. I'd love to have you here. Because the next time something in someone else's life makes you feel like you're falling behind, remember what that feeling is actually measuring. Not their wealth, just their spending, filtered through whatever they chose not to show you. The scoreboard you've been quietly losing to was never real in the first place.